Welcome to the Profitable NDIS Provider podcast, where we're joined by your hosts, Tania Gomez and Paul Bryan. In each episode, we'll be sharing valuable insights and tips to help you turn your NDIS business into a profitable venture. So whether you're just starting out or looking to take your business to the next level, you've come to the right place. Let's stop surviving and start thriving.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Profitable NDIS Provider podcast. I'm Tania Gomez, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Paul Bryan. Hey, Paul, how are you going today?
G'day, Tania. I love being called wonderful. It's so good to be here. Hey,
Yes.
Today we have got a really interesting one. We're chatting with my good friend, Stephen Franks, and we're talking all about how to always make a profit in business and have those strong financial practices and systems in place. So, Stephen, sorry, good day, and could you tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure, Paul. Hi, everyone. So I run Higher Purpose Accounting Advisory. I have 25 plus years experience within commerce, government and not-for-profit organisations, both large and small, and that's been in Australia and in the UK. Now I have my own business and I'm helping NDIS, disabilities, child health, not-for-profits, basically purpose-type businesses, establish robust financial management in their businesses. So I'm doing things like reviewing their processes and systems, identifying the issues and the opportunities that there are, and then creating a roadmap that we can work with so that they can all be implemented and we can achieve ultimately financial peace of mind. I'm big on empowering businesses with financial literacy. It's all well and good to just have go, oh, we've got an accountant and they're just, that's their responsibility, but you've still got to have your finger on the pulse. So you've got to be able to see what's kind of happening and what things might cause any problems. And also I've written a book around the NDIS called How the NDIS Can Work for You. So that helps providers with a whole range of things, as well as some online courses, starting with a group program as well, that will help this cohort.
Oh, that's brilliant,
That's
mate.
great.
We had you along talking to our Momentum Tribe providers a little while ago, and the feedback was so good because the way you delivered the information just made it really simple for people to understand their financial obligations, their financial issues that they had been facing, and how to bring resolution to some of those things.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing, that I always trying to, do it in a way that's simple for the non-accounting type people.
Yeah.
I think finances is one of those things that makes or breaks a business as well. That, cash flow really is lifeblood in a business. And I feel like it is something that small businesses just really don't focus on. I think there's so much to do in a small business that it's so easy to just think, well, I've got money coming in. That's kind of the extent of it, that you get focused on, let's get the next sale, let's bring in the next dollar, as opposed to, well, how much of that money is mine? How much can I touch? How much buffer have I got if something goes wrong? And I see that that's actually where a lot of businesses really get into big trouble, is that their cash flow gets compromised because they're really not across it as much as they should be.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. And many of them, because they're not financial minded, it's not their skill set. They quite often, they're not on top of it, and they're relying on other people to do things which it's not their business. So they don't know exactly what's happening at the coalface.
Yeah. So in your experience, can you tell us about the biggest challenges you see for NDIS providers when it comes to finances?
Well, we just touched on one of them there, which is that, it's not necessarily their skill set. So, it's a bit of a challenge for them to understand their numbers and things. And so really they're just not necessarily focused on it because they think it's too hard, or they think someone else can do it for them. But they need to spend a bit of time on it themselves to really understand what's going on. Cash flow is really a thing I find that there's not enough people out there doing cash flow forecasts and looking forward. And particularly in the NDIS space, the claiming sometimes they're not on top of doing that fast enough and following things up. So therefore then there's cash sitting out there that could be in their bank account. Also too, they sometimes say, oh, well, I don't have time to do this because I'm serving my clients. It's a bit of a false economy as well. Also too, in terms of the things that they need to be doing, you know, what's their money and what's someone else's money, as you mentioned before, Tanya, is, you know, they're not paying the super to the funds on time, and then they're incurring a penalty because of it. So they're not planning well enough, they're not budgeting, and then that creates a risk for the business, and they're not really doing. They might be good at risk managing around looking after the clients, but they're not good at looking after their own business in that respect. The other thing too, and we'll touch on it a bit more as we go on, is not setting aside the funds in different bank accounts and saying, okay, this is where the money is, and it's not that I don't touch that for any other purpose than for what that account is for.
Yeah.
One thing too, and one thing too I find is that the people in this space, they have issues around getting the staff paid properly. You know, you've got the SHADS award, and it's complicated and it changes from time to time, and they're not always right on top of getting it right, and they're not getting the things done. But there's systems out there that can help them with that now, where it actually, when the awards get changed, then they actually they get updated automatically in these software, so they don't have these issues anymore. And then the numbers, the numbers of their business and what's driving the different things in their business, they need to understand that.
Yeah, great. Well, I wonder, you mentioned obviously systems there. Could you maybe elaborate on some of those simple practices that small and medium providers could implement to overcome some of those challenges, or to make sure that they don't fall into those pitfalls that maybe a lot of providers have around their finances?
Yeah, well, it's planning. So it's about having a good budget set up, having a cash flow forecast that sits out for the whole year, but it's more detailed, like for say a 3-month period, and it's updated every week. I find that's really important for people to understand what's going on. Having checklists. I think you can't have too many checklists. It's amazing when people are busy how you can just forget things, and you just need to make sure that you're doing everything and you're doing it at the right time. And also too, with my clients, I get them to do a financial timeline as well, so they know exactly what things happen at what point in the month and each quarter and half year and year, so that they can plan for those things.
I love that idea of a financial timeline. So knowing what's coming ahead. I mean, our listeners can't see, but just to the left of me, I've got a massive annual planner that outlines when large costs are happening, when large events are happening, when I've got to have certain things, when my holidays are happening. Just actually having an idea of that whole forecast ahead of what your business looks like 3 months from now. I think a lot of people miss that idea, particularly when it comes to finances, because you kind of, as you said before, you're kind of going, well, I just need to get the next invoice done or bring the next client on.
Yeah, totally.
So
Do you think that?
really love. Sorry,
Tanya. I was going to say, things like you mentioned, like separate bank accounts and, figuring out your metrics and that sort of stuff. I'm assuming that at this point, maybe some of our listeners are going, "Oh, I'm not doing any of that." Where would you think be the first place they should start? Like what should be the most important out of, like you mentioned about having a budget, cash flow forecast, checklists, financial timeline? What would you think would maybe be the first thing they should jump onto?
I think having the bank accounts separate is a really important thing, because then you can,
Yeah, cool.
it's going to help you with your budgeting as well. So I think you have that, and you have your budget, and then you have your cash flow.
Fantastic.
So I have a question around that. I use a profit first model in my businesses, and that is really the starting point of that is figuring out your percentages and figuring out what percentages should you be aiming for. And that's not something that I was aware of before I went and read the Profit First book. But for me, that really changed my mind. I think I always had a tax bank account and I had a profit bank account. So I'd move my profits so I knew what was, extra, and I'd move my tax into one, both, all of my tax goes in one. And I've done that since my first business when I was 21. But and that kind of made a lot of sense. My accountant many years ago told me to do that. But I'd never really figured out this whole idea of, well, what actually are the metrics that I'm aiming for? And so in my businesses, it's something like 30% for overhead, 40% for cost of delivery, 10% for profit, 30, 40, 50, 60. And then there's things like a growth budget and an owner's comp budget is kind of how I work it out. And for me, just having some kind of metric, because I feel like I'm a teacher by background. When I'm leaving teaching to come and running my own small business, I didn't know anyone else who I could say, well, am I paying myself the profit? Do I pay myself distributions? How do I pay myself was always so confusing. And when I heard about this model and started using it, it's just like, well, I just allow 10% for owner's comp. And that means whatever my revenue figure is, that might change. And that sometimes is a bit annoying. But if you're consistently delivering amounts, then you can kind of work on that and you can do your cash flow projections to go, okay, what will my salary be at 10%? And that kind of changed my mind. Are you familiar with Profit First? And is the percentages something that you get your clients to look at?
Yeah, so I am familiar with it. I'm not a Profit First practitioner or any of that, but yeah, you're right. Those sorts of percentages that you just said are the sort of percentages that I'm using with my clients. I think that, the whole thing goes around the thing of, in terms of those percentages, you've got to make it work for your business. And you need to start out with what you have. And, you were saying about the percentage in terms of your profit at the very start, that you might just start with 1% of your profit because you've got to work out how to get your expenses in line so that you're able to meet all your obligations around your taxes and super and everything as they fall due.
Yeah.
So it can be a bit of a transitional thing that happens.
Yeah.
But putting those monies aside periodically into each of those accounts, doing it, gets you into a rhythm and you start doing it. And yes, if you start it from the invoices that come in this week, but you've still got your operating account, you've still got that money there to hopefully cover what you've got, and you're slowly building up what you really need to have in each of those accounts.
Yeah. I think the rhythm,
and then you're
love
paying
that.
out
I think
your bellies regularly.
Yeah. I think what you said there about rhythm is really perfect, because even what you're talking about the timeline, it is all of rhythm. It is all around going, okay, these are the times where you're paying, these are the weeks that have extra pay runs. These are the weeks when super is due. This is when BAS is due, so that you have a large decrease in cash flow at those points, and that you have to actually balance that out. Because I've run businesses for many years, and it's still sometimes, when I have to make those BAS transfers, I get really upset. It's like, no, where is all my hard-earned money going? So I think I think I can't be alone in that. And I have dyscalculia, which is dyslexia for numbers. And so the number side of business was always really hard for me, and I've had to work really hard. But I feel like those percentages make me understand it in a way that seems manageable, and then I can track my performance. Because for me, I never knew what was good as an overhead number. And I'd always had a 50% cost of delivery and a 50% overhead, and I couldn't figure out why I wasn't making money. And so by working that out and figuring out where I stood, I was able to over time go, right, let's aim for 30% overhead. And that means that over a period of time, I have to cut these costs. And we talk a lot about taking on new staff. All of that is a cost before there's a return on that. So being able to plot that out over 12 months, at what point does that salesperson return the income? Or what point does that new accommodation you're purchasing receive tenants? All of those things to try and cash flow forecast that are really vital, I think, in making sure that you just have enough cash in the bank to keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And yeah, there's that just getting to that rhythm, doing those things consistently is going to get you there. And it may feel like it's a bit of a challenge or it's out of your league, but being able to see something in front of you and having somebody there to support you will get you there. You just need to keep at it.
Yeah. So the next question that I had for you was around specific metrics or indicators that providers should be monitoring closely. What are the metrics that you work with your clients to measure ongoing as a health check of financial health?
Yeah. Well, I think so. So the first thing is, we've kind of talked about the profit first system. So doing those things around the cash and putting those into the right sort of places. Those accounts are going to help you with your cash side of the business. But there's, the things like understanding what your direct costs are, so your direct costs of delivery, what is making that up, and then what is your overheads. And at the end of the day, if you want to make a profit, you've got to make sure that you've got enough in the delivery and not too much in the overhead. Otherwise, you're just not going to make a profit. So really, just focusing on you've put your gross profit margin in your net profit margin, which is what comes after you've taken your overheads off. And that's it, and for people out there, your overheads are those things like your rent and your utilities and your admin staff who, they're supporting the business, and you maybe some marketing and things like that. But yes, and there's a bit of a metric out there too about, what that gross margin should be, and if you look out there, you'll see in the NDIS space, for example, around 30 to 44% can be a benchmark, but really it just depends on what your business is and the services that you're delivering.
Yeah.
You mentioned that sort of gross and net profit percentages there. Would you say that there's an average that different types of providers should be aiming for, or is it just way too vast a difference and they shouldn't be trying to meet what somebody else is doing?
Yeah, I think it's the second. It is a bit fast, and it's, to try and meet what someone else is doing. I mean, you can use them you can look at what other people are doing who are doing similar things and see what it looks like. But is your business operating in the same environment, delivering things the same sort of way? Or is there some other thing that is going to prevent you from being able to do that?
Yeah, and one of the other things I see coming up quite regularly is providers, owners, really not knowing how to pay themselves. Like some of them just, they've come from doing support work, and so they pay them themselves only the hours that they do. But once they start, growing and they have team, like do they take salary distributions? how have you seen providers navigate that growth process and how they, reimburse themselves for the work that they are doing?
Yeah, that's right. Because, they can be fine because they may quite often be paying themselves if they're doing service delivery, but they're not paying themselves for all the rest of what they're doing in their business. So, part of it is, working out if you can be a bit more profitable, then you can then allocate more to your salary. So, and again, the profit's going to come from what you're doing and, how well you've got your systems and processes running and that do you need to have as many people working or with you on what it is, or do you need to get a system in place where you're not got as much admin support because, it's automated.
Yeah, we had a good conversation with Chris from Care BPO a little while ago, explaining how, some offshore staff could help with that sort of thing, but also, with some of the guys around their software about leaning on the software a bit harder, it could actually relieve some of the costs on their business, even though the software costs a bit. It's sometimes cheaper than a staff member and often cheaper than a staff member. So, I think really understanding what you want to happen in the business and where you want to go with it, and what really are the costs that you should be considering and costs that you shouldn't have yet. I see a lot of providers at the moment who, they've got, maybe a $300,000-$400,000 business and they have a marketing person and then they have a, someone just for rostering and then they have someone else just for this and that. And they've got a admin heavy business, which just really can't support it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it drains the business and they're not part of what's actually going to bring them more income into the business. I mean, maybe the marketing people might be able to, but, you need to consider whether you need to have it in-house or whether you can have it outside or you have someone who's a contractor and it works for you to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really an important thing. It's really figuring out your cost base and figuring out what are the essential expenses versus what are the nice to haves or the things that you think that you might need that actually could you do without them for a little bit to see some efficiencies. Can you provide some examples, Stephen, of small or medium businesses who successfully turned their finances around, who were, not doing so great and you stepped in and helped them, and I suppose how they turned it around so that if anyone listening is in the situation where finances are quite dire, that they can, have some examples of how they might be able to get to a better place?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can talk about a provider located in Sydney, and they provide supports to assist with daily life and social participation. They're a non-NDIS business, and they have about 20 employees and about 50 participants, and they grew pretty quickly. They were successful at what they were doing. People liked them, but their back office didn't keep pace with what was going on, particularly around the finances. They had a tax accountant. The tax accountant was somebody who was their personal tax accountant. They weren't particularly familiar with the NDIS, but they knew of it and knew that there was some challenges in the space. But they really, all the tax accountant was doing was doing the BAS, making sure that they've got that thing done and their income tax and from time to time they'd have a chat, but there really wasn't a whole lot of support on the financial side of things. So, and as a result too, the financial side of things was more reactive than proactive. So, there were times where, they were only paying things because they had cash in the bank. They hadn't chased some of the stuff up, or they'd had, for example, people's plans finishing, so they weren't getting paid when they submitted initially, and then they had to follow it up and do manual claims, etc. So that meant also that because they didn't have that cash in, so then they were doing things like not paying super on time and are on payment plan with the tax office. And so what we did is we got them to think about, okay, so set up some bank accounts so you can put the monies in different places so you know that that's what they relate to. And then we also put together a cash flow forecast. So you were invoicing these monies. When are you going to get paid for them? Because sometimes they're invoicing things and yes, things go through nice and smoothly. They might get paid, that week, but quite often things are taking 2-3 weeks. No, it's in a different month when they're actually getting paid for things. So that's putting a real challenge on their business, it was. So also too, then from that, then once we'd done all that, set it up, we got them to make sure that when they were doing the pay runs each fortnight, they were transferring those into the particular account for the super and the pay-as-you-go withholding and all that. And it also meant then that when time came to pay for each of them, they had the money there to pay for it. But, as I was kind of mentioning before, there's a bit of a transition period for that to happen.
Yeah. Awesome. So they managed to get that turned around. They got the accounts in place. And obviously they had that buffer period of, we've set this up, but now we've got to fill the backlog, I guess, of cash flow and get that working. Yeah. But they turned it around, right?
They turned it around because they realized that they just needed to get it sorted out. They could see that it was just running them down and they just didn't want to be in debt, to tax office, etc.
Yeah.
And that was taking up their mind and it was affecting their ability to help the people that were trying to help.
Look, I got so much out of today. I know that so many of our listeners have quite possibly been at this point, sometime themselves where they've been behind the ball on their cash flow and they haven't really got a system set up for their budget and knowing what's coming up. So a couple of those main takeaways I got for our listeners are, really understanding your cash flow, developing some financial literacy around your business, like understanding your profit and loss and your profit margins, developing a really set up budget for your business as well. And also that idea of that first port of call, if you really don't know where to start, is set up some different bank accounts so that you can start to allocate, some funds here for paying your BAS, some funds for wages, some funds for marketing, and having those things in place so you can get that ball rolling. And the other thing you mentioned was, just having a checklist. So maybe every month you're going through that and going, have I done this? Have I transferred these funds? Have I paid these bills? So you don't miss things because, as a provider, you're managing, admin staff, you're managing, your support workers, you've got clients, you've got, networking. It's really easy to miss some of those core things. So setting up that checklist, but also the financial timeline. All of my momentum clients right now listening are going, yes, Paul, we know, we've heard about the calendar. Everything goes on the calendar, set up the calendar, right? Calendar is God, but everything is there and you understand what's happening and what's coming. So that was brilliant. Thank you so much for outlining those things and probably, highlighting some of those areas that maybe if you're a listener and you're not in a place where you want to be financially, there is some gold there to just start implementing some simple steps to start that process of becoming a profitable provider. So, Stephen, how can listeners get in touch with you if they want to ask some more questions or find out more about this?
Well, they can get in touch with me through, I'll share a link with you so you can book in a 15-minute chat. No obligation. We can just have a quick chat about what's going on, see where I can help you. I also, through my website, I've got training courses on there that cover key areas from implementing good financial habits, for example, to budgeting and cash flow and understanding your financial numbers and things like that. I also have a monthly newsletter, so I'm always sharing news and tips around the NDIS space and tips just for small businesses and micro businesses in general. And of course, there's my social links as well. And at the moment, I've got a wait list as well for people who might want to join my group program. So we take the online courses I have and I work with them in a group setting to help them implement the things, the key activities and that from those courses.
Yeah, brilliant. And that's higherpurposeaccounting.com.au, right?
That's correct.
Fantastic.
Wonderful. Well, that is a wrap for today. Thank you so much, Stephen, for joining us. It's been so wonderful to meet you and to share all that wonderful knowledge. And thanks again, Paul, for joining me today in another wonderful episode of the Profitable NDIS Provider. We'll talk to you all again soon. See you later.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Profitable NDIS Provider podcast with Tania Gomez and Paul Bryan. We hope you found today's episode informative and valuable. If you enjoyed the show, please don't forget to subscribe, leave us a rating, and share it with others who could benefit from our insights. Until next time, keep thriving.
Hi guys, it's Tania here. I wanted to let you know that we're having a Christmas party in Perth for all NDIS providers. It's a free event on the 6th of December, co-hosted with Tania Gomez Consulting, Paul's Business, Action and Intent, and the amazing Care BPO. It's free for the whole NDIS community and we would love to see you there. You can find the booking link on Eventbrite or on any of our social medias. We really can't wait to see you then and celebrate a fantastic year with you.